perfection is a bullshit lie that is never going to happen. I hate that saying practice makes perfect. To me, I think practice is preparation for all the imperfect stuff that's going to happen in your life. It's a way for you to gauge and say, like, I've been here before. I can do this kind of stuff. Just because you say it can be done doesn't mean that it won't be able to be done.
Hello, amazing Sweet Vera community. This is Amber, your host of the Heart Leader podcast. And today I am joined by Jason Tharp. He is an awesome illustrator and author, but he is also an inspirational expert. He has survived brain cancer. He's a patient advocate, and he's just this resilient optimist who has taken his artistic ability and just created a website that has all of this information that you can be inspired from. He has inspired me to want to be a better person. So, Jason, I just am thrilled to sit with an Ohio small town hero and just get to know you even more than I already have. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's wonderful.
It's like a refreshing moment for me because we've had such similar journeys in a way, coming from a small town and having these moments in our life where we've been told by medical people, love them, they do all they can, but being told, like, you might want to start figuring out your exit strategy because that's just what you're going to have to do. But you took a different strategy and said, well, that's your story. So can you maybe start a little bit with that? Like, what is your journey, especially around the brain cancer and around just writing your own story around it?
I kind of feel like maybe when you break out a small town, you kind of go through a lot of bumps in the road, right? Like you kind of earn your stripes, so to speak. And we all have these like bumps that we have to kind of go through. But mine started July 12th of 2021. I had a seizure and didn't know I had a seizure. My wife knew something was up and took me to urgent care, sent me to the emergency room where they did a CT scan. So there was a shadow, which that was the only thing I was told. And I was going to wait for a bed to open up, which is really confusing when you don't know what a shadow is, because you're thinking a shadow like in a traditional sense, right? And then fast forward just a little bit, which ended up being 2 days of sitting in emergency room waiting for MRI, and then MRI, and they find a tumor in my brain, but don't bother to tell me it's a tumor, right? Like it's just like somebody we interviewed it, and within it seemed like forever. Somebody came in and told us it was pretty sure had to have been maybe like a first year med student or somebody just kind of doing rounds and just kind of briefly said, has somebody told you have they read your results? And said no, and they're like, oh, it looks like a high grade glioma, and kind of just walked away and said somebody will be in to talk to you in a couple hours or a few minutes or whatever. And after a while, like doctor Googled it, and it's not a good thing. High grade glioma is not a good thing. But kind of fast forward a little bit, I had a really good surgeon, and took longer than normal to get back the diagnosis because the doctors, or I shouldn't say just doctors, it was institutions, couldn't agree on what it was. And then I finally did go in to get the diagnosis from what would have been my first oncologist, and the results were not good. They got the results in front of me. I always like to say that they did a bad job is kind of like giving an ultimate compliment. It was beyond bad the way that the news was said to me. It immediately was pretty much like, you're going to be dead in 7 months, kind of like you alluded to, like, plan the end. It's all this stuff like this. But the part that this doctor didn't take in consideration is the person. They didn't know who they were talking to, or to even ask better questions. Like maybe like, well, can we question his results? Can we look at it? Never thought once, like, this was sent to 4 different places. Why was that sent to 4 different places? Could we dig a little further or whatever? They just accepted it. And how I like to say it is that they were writing my ending while I was writing my beginning. And little did they know, I've been telling stories my whole life. And I know so much could happen from in the, once upon a time in the end. And while I let myself feel all of those emotions, which I'm happy to talk about all those things, I never once believed that this was true of me. The doctors are experts in what they did. No doubt about it that they were an expert in their field, but they weren't an expert in me. And that was the missing chunk, at least from my end. Coming from a small town, when you want to do big things, like a lot of times you're on your own. And I think that that's what I turn back on all of the things that I'm sure we're going to discuss that when I was a kid going through, I looked at as being what was wrong about my life actually turned into be the things that saved my life, which is always pretty interesting too, when you have the beauty of hindsight.
And again, it's like that being able to come together and find that you have a similar journey with someone else. I think that's what's helpful in creating these podcasts, because
Right.
sometimes we can feel so alone when we're going through it. And I know as a kid, when I was navigating through those challenges, I was like, oh, I'm the only person in the world who has to be feeling this different and this isolated. And, you know, now I read your website and I read your story, and I'm like, here's someone who was in a few towns away from me,
Mm-hmm.
who was feeling exactly the same way I was. And we didn't have internet like we do
Right.
now. It's not like I could just FaceTime you and find you somewhere and take solace in a friend who was going through what I was going through. But those are the skills that kind of built us into when somebody told us, well, you either do this or you die. We were like, okay, you know what? We've been through this before.
Right.
No, you don't get to tell me how my life's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You took that when you were told this is how it's going to go for you. And I know from my own journey, I found none of my doctors were talking to each other. Like it was the most siloed. And coming from a corporate environment, I know silos.
Mm-hmm.
And the medical field took it to a whole different level. I'm like, I am the person who's navigating this illness. I'm the one who is seeing how none of you are talking to each other, and I'm the one who's sick. Why am I the
Right.
one who's responsible for taking all this information across and making sure you all know what the other doctor is telling me? And you have taken that and created kind of an approach where you're helping doctors see that there is a different way from a patient's side. So, how did your story go from getting to a point where you not only navigated through, but you're like, I'm going to collect this data so that I can help others with it? That's why I call you a hometown hero in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it started out with dealing with all of when you grow up a kid where you never really fit in your skin, right? And everybody tells you all the stuff that's wrong with you, and you build your worth around that, right? That's kind of what I did. And so growing up, you know, even though I changed a lot, like, I grew a lot. When this doctor told me that I was going to be dead in 7 months, what had happened was this, like, it felt like all of this, I mean, I like to call it just probably anger, or rage, or trauma, or whatever, just ended up like kind of coming and settling right on my throat. And it felt like, if you could imagine, like a giant hand just choking you. And each day it would just get tighter and tighter and tighter until, for me, I was supposed to start treatment. I was told my diagnosis on Tuesday. That following Tuesday, I was going to be starting my first round of radiation. And so by Thursday, I still hadn't slept and really felt suffocating. And that hand was like strangling me hardcore. And I reached out to my radiation oncologist, who I really, really liked. I reached out saying I wanted a second opinion, knowing full well I didn't want a second opinion. I just needed to tell somebody that I thought might actually be able to help me in some sort of way, because I think that's one of the things when we're trying to advocate for ourselves, is we look for those that could help, right? Kind of the back to the Mr. Rogers thing, like in a crisis, look for the ones that will help. And I spoke with their fellow and explained, they explained to me all the reasons why a second diagnosis was a dumb idea, which I knew. And I just said, well, I don't, that's not really why I called. I really want to tell you what I was told. And I told them, and they were shocked and, said, like, the doctor will get back to you. I'm gonna have to run it by him. I don't even know how to react to this, is really kind of what they said. And so that weekend, my wife and I, we just did everything to try to avoid reality, trying to escape what was happening because you couldn't make heads or tails of it because it just felt horrible. And then by Sunday, when I was really, I mean, I can't even really explain it other than just like every waking second thinking, it's done. What's the point? All of this stuff, all of these years essentially of this doubt and all these, you deserve all this. This is any rock bottom moment you kind of take in your life and compound it to this moment. And that's pretty much what it felt like. And my phone rang, and it was, I go to Ohio State. It was OSU Medical Center, and it was my radiation oncologist called me. And, it's never good on a Sunday when your doc calls. You just think like, oh, this is not good news. And he was awesome. And he just said, I just need you to breathe. I don't believe a word that was told to you. And it was then I knew that this was a different conversation. So I walked away from everybody I was around, and I was just walking on his bike path. And he proceeds to spend the next hour and a half to explain to me why he became a doctor, why my case was different, and why he didn't believe what was told to me. And what he didn't know, that on my end, what was happening was this energy was getting pulled out of me. Like what was choking me out, it felt like waves of just something reaching in my throat and pulling out. Like it was just like something out of the movies where you would have like the sparkle things and all this stuff like this, to a point where at the end of the conversation, I am literally on my knees, like I am talking snot and tears. And I'm sure everybody thought there was something really wrong with this guy. And I told him, I said, I don't know what made you call me today, but you saved my life. That was the last time I had a bad thought. Last time I've not slept all night. Last time where any doubt has ever entered my mind. And I decided then that I was going to be the best patient they ever saw. And what I mean by that was that I stopped accepting what they knew as my reality. And I knew that I could start creating my reality. And I could do that by being the version of me that I wanted to see from everybody else. And so I just started moving in that direction. And what I like to think of it now, like kind of looking back, was just being hyper aware of what I was thinking at the moment. Back then, I just kind of went through the motions, right? Like I think like pretty much everybody does. But I started becoming hyper aware of what I was doing and would ask myself constantly, is this what somebody that's going to heal and be cured from do? If not, then change it. Change your action, stuff like that. And so I got really real with myself and just asked better questions. And I think what the key is where people miss is in asking better questions. It's you have to do the most important thing is shut up and listen for an answer. And it will show up not when you want it to, it'll show up when you're not expecting it. This is why it's so important to zip your lips and stop talking it over and trying to figure stuff out. And that's kind of what started the whole ball in that direction. And then it immediately became, once I got my new oncologist, because I did fire the other one. They were immediately off my team. I don't believe a doctor is the captain of this team. I'm a captain. They're a co-captain. And the new doc was, the first thing I said to him was, I want to talk to other doctors and be able to share my story of what it means for them to enter a room and understand that I am not a spreadsheet. I am a person. I'm not a stat, and really kind of put my foot down in that direction. And, luckily I've been able to connect with some pretty good docs and pretty good, be a patient advocate in the right way. It took that willingness to step into the uncomfortable, but I didn't have to step. It was forced on me and I went with it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, I think people think when things go bad in their life, that means I'm bad, but it doesn't. It just means that sometimes you got to wake up to what's being shown to you. And sometimes it takes some force to see it. For me, it was a big time force, and then I just roll with it.
Yeah. So much good in what you just brought forward from you know, the doctors aren't doing it to you because they don't care. And I feel like I've had some conversations, especially in the alternative health field, where we desire to make doctors the bad guy.
Right.
And they're not. They got into the profession for the very same reason that most of us get into any profession. the desire to do something positive for those that we're in service to. But along the way, things get busy. They get 15 minutes with a person. Like it becomes a little more challenging. And what you demonstrate is then you have to take it into your own hands in some way and decide that you're the one that's going to write the story, that you're the only one inside of your body that is getting all of the information, unless you hire a patient advocate to help you in creating that flow, which is different than how you're doing patient advocacy. And I would like to talk about the nuance for how
Sure.
you're doing it. But there's a way that you can do all of it and still have your voice in the flow, because
Right.
it is your voice that's going to determine your outcome. And it can be so overwhelming when you're getting all this information fed into you to like then, and I love that you have this power up project, right? To
Mhm.
like power up and say, no, I'm empowered to make the decisions, because I'm certain it takes a lot of strength to walk in and fire a doctor who's the one telling you, I'm going to be the one to tell you how this is going to go. So
Right.
if you're willing to talk about just the strength that it takes for you, the childhood, it sounds like, led to, okay, I've been bullied enough that I'm not going to be bullied into my healthcare. But
Right.
if someone were to come to you who hadn't experienced that, do you have any tips that you could share to say, hey, here's how you can power up and just
Yeah.
know that this is your life and nobody else gets to tell you how it's going to unfold?
Pretty much my whole life, I was told of all the things that were possible in my life. Everybody always kind of said, you're never going to be able to do this. You're never going to be able to do that. Because when you do live in a small town and you say, like, I want to grow up to be an author, an illustrator, or whatever, people don't even know what that is. So they're going to tell you that you're not going to be able to do it. So when you enter in the world of cancer, these docs are trying to solve a problem with science. They're looking for a pill, right? They're looking for an answer, the same as what I mean, I would equate it to the same as people that maybe are trying to lose weight and they're looking for that magic pill to take versus like the obvious answer, which is in front of you. Walk around the block, eat better food, take care of yourself, put better stuff in your head, right? Well, for me, that was the initial approach. Well, like if the docs all have this science figured out, then I am the one that's the missing link. So how can I go about fixing me? So then I started kind of looking at, oh, I can bring a better attitude. I can eat better. I can take care of myself, all this stuff like that. So I started approaching that and just doing research, basic research on those things. And I think what it does come down to how you teach somebody that may not have had those experiences is I would look at somebody and I would say, like, okay, there's something that you've done throughout the day, today, this month, this week that you didn't think you could do. Doesn't matter if it how big or small it is. It could be just something as simple as just like getting out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning versus getting up at 9, right? Your version of hard is not the same as mine, and instead of comparing yourself to other people around you, start comparing yourself to the version you were yesterday. And each day, your goal should be to be better than what you were the day before. So you're constantly chasing that ball of what would be the next thing. It's not about trying to be perfect because perfection is a bullshit lie that is never going to happen. I hate that saying practice makes perfect. To me, I think practice is preparation for all the imperfect stuff that's going to happen in your life. It's a way for you to gauge and say, like, I've been here before. I can do this kind of stuff. Just because you say it can be done doesn't mean that it won't be able to be done. In terms of kind of fighting the cancer part for me and how I was able to apply that thought process, it came down to this is where the doctor presented me with the science. They said, okay, so here's the deal. There's no genetic markers that say you're going to grow this thing. So there's no way. But they also said it's not genetic. So there was the relief from me of like, okay, I'm not going to pass this on to my kids. Cool. Like that's awesome. It's going to end with me. Right. But then as I started sitting back and thinking about it, and I sat down and I really started meditating and journaling and trying to figure this out, I was like, well, wait a minute. If there's no way to tell who made, like what gene made it, that means I made it. And so therefore, if I made this thing, I can also be the same person that makes what whatever it is that makes it not come back. And I said, okay, well, because right out of the gate, I never have resonated with fight cancer. That whole fight can't. It just doesn't make sense to me. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is that I'm a person that is a, if you think about it, you bring about it kind of person. And therefore, if I wake up every day and my message in myself, I'm telling it, it's today I have to fight cancer. That means there's got to be cancer to fight. So how I presented it back to my doc after the next appointment was I said, okay, so here's the deal. You tell me that like I said, there's no gene that makes it. I think I could be the one that makes it not come back. And when you say fight cancer, that doesn't resonate with me because I've spent my whole life fighting myself and I'm done fighting myself. I'm choosing to live from this point forward. And it's just a simple, it doesn't mean that I don't wake up and I don't do all the stuff to make sure that this doesn't come back, which people would say is quote unquote fight cancer. But I will definitely say one thing you'll never see me wearing is an F cancer t-shirt or some sort of like whatever message because everybody is going through stuff every single day. And we're all doing bad stuff to ourselves every single day. And it's by choosing to live where you actually really transform your life. Whatever you're numbing yourself worth for or with or whatever is not the answer to the evolution of the person you want to become. It really is leaning back into the stuff that's scary, the stuff that maybe people have told you can't do, finding a solution for those. So that's what I would recommend to people that are struggling with that. I've never lived through this. Well, you have. You just are looking at my lens. You're looking at through my eyeballs instead of your eyeballs, right? And I think that's a lot of the world. I mean, I literally today posted a YouTube short, and somebody's comment was it was about you're doing great. Look at all the positive stuff that you went through that you didn't think you could do. And somebody's first comments were, "Great, I'm about to get evicted. I can't. I have no prospects of a job. I could have like gone to college, but I can't do that. Anyways, that wouldn't help out in a couple of years. So yeah, you're right. I'm doing great." And I thought, like, right, you missed the whole point of the conversation. Like it's your lens you have to look through, not my lens. And how could you change that? And we all have that power to change. So that was a
Yeah,
long answer, but hopefully that.
it was a fabulous answer. And part of what I took from it is it's not like you look at everything through rose colored glasses and pretend like you're not having challenging feelings, because that's not going to get you where you need to go either. And I feel like sometimes that's where, when I talk to people, they get a little bit backward, even on me. It's like, oh, your life is just so great. And you never have these hard emotions of feeling sad or feeling scared or feeling grief. And that's not true. That we wouldn't be human if we didn't have those. It's where do we place our most focus when we have them? So you had said you would be willing to share the emotions that you went through on your journey and how you still turned them to be like, if you look at your website, you can tell how positive and happy you are. It's not just a joke. Like, you really are this positive, happy person, even though you've navigated some really challenging things. So how do you still have these real emotions, yet still return to being happy?
So I'm a highly emotional person. So like I would say like I really love, I guess what they would call, it might be not the right term, but like chick flicks, right? I love movies that make me feel. And why I like him so much, because I've tried to figure out why it is I like him so much, but I think I like him so much because when I feel I'm alive, right? Like I feel most alive when I'm feeling. And so it felt like to get to, first off, when somebody tells you, at least in my situation, you have a stage or it's not stage, grade 4 glioblastoma, is what I was told. You think about, okay, well, every movie made, they kill the patient, they kill the person off with brain cancer. So like this is the way it goes. And so immediately what happens is you pause on cancer and it just keeps replaying in your head. And you feel betrayed, not by the person, the doctor, but I felt betrayed by myself. Like, what is like, how did this happen? So you kind of like let that in a little bit. And then you go through the feelings. And the way that I would explain it is I knew, like I said, I knew that this was not the end. So I never let that truly root itself in there, but I let myself feel all of the feelings. So I would sit and I would look. I mean, it was the worst thing. I would sit and look and watch, and I go like, this is what life is going to be like without me here. And I would see like my kids. I would see, my family like going through stuff, and I would, you know, pause and really feel how shitty that felt, and look at it and go like, this is what they're all going to do when I'm not here. And then what you I think the key was is then I look at it from the flip side. Okay, it doesn't have to be like that. How can I flip this? How can I let this emotion go through? Because I think it's really important. It is the trauma shake, so to speak, where you let that emotion go. Like it, for so long, I would let the bad stuff people told me growing up become who I am. I would let it define me. And this is where I wish that you could bottle it's not bottling up a magic pill. I wish I could bottle up what the magic that comes from being diagnosed with this thing. The amount of stuff that I don't care about now that I would care about before is insane. Like it's like all of a sudden, like you look at the world in a whole different lens. Like, you want to cut me off in traffic? Cool. You must not need to get there more than I would. I don't feel the need to yell or whatever. Like, there's none of that stuff enters into the picture anymore. It's such a blip. Like, I never understood before where people would say stuff like, you know, this moment in time is just a blip on your radar. But until like you get this clarity, and I think that must be where it comes from, because a lot of times now I look at things and I just like, man, this is just Monday, like, and it's like, it's one Monday that I'm going to have forever. And once it really sunk into me to understand that the only thing that's real in our lives is this moment right now. When we hit record on this and we started recording this, it's gone. It'll never come back. Right. And you can't hold on. I can't hold on to, boy, I wish I would have resaid this and then keep playing that over and over every day. Old me would have done that 100%. But then what happened was, is as I started to evolve, which I think is what it initially was, and I started to meditate more and truly understand what meditation was, and started to kind of like disassociate who I am or what I define myself as instead of like, what are the possibilities? And that's where I started kind of really kind of picturing this idea. And it was all the stuff I had taken in from like reading quantum science and nerding out on all these different things with meditation, all this stuff like this, where all of a sudden it goes like, wait a minute, I think this is what they meant, and it was like, I didn't need, like, the first time I remember I read it, Dr. Joe's book, I had a, I had my phone out with the dictionary, and I had to stop every other word and look up what it meant because it was just so confusing. But then all of a sudden, like this, it just clicked. He talks a lot about like sometimes it'll just click and you'll get it. And that's what it was. And for me, what I realized was that I was walking my life with two versions of me. I had the real me. I should say two little versions of me. And when I say little, I'm talking about my childhood, right? Like where I was as a kid. Because there was two things about my childhood was real. One, I knew I was a good person and I loved people. And what I really wanted out of life, I knew that out of the get-go. That is love. Then I had the other chunk, which was the fear. Everything everybody told me and the stuff I'd tell myself, and I believed it. And the problem was, is I was going down the path of life. I was holding the fear in the right hand, and it's the noisy kid. It's the one that is going to get all your attention and everything. It's a squeaky wheel. And I paid so much attention that I let go of the left hand and I let go of love for a long, long time. And when I finally realized that the fear, all it was doing was just trying to get me to pay attention and steal my present moment and try to tell me all the reasons why none of this stuff was possible for me. Once I realized that that was just all made up nonsense, that by the time I realized it, I thought, oh no, I let go of love. And little did I know the whole time, love was off like putting like those little Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs that eventually led back to me. And it was like, it was just sitting there all along, been like, where you been? I've been waiting for you. And in that moment, you realize that like all the stuff that we make such a big deal in our lives are just nothing but lies that we've told ourselves over and over again. And we believe it. And if we learn that, like, if bad exists, good exists well as well. Maybe you're just looking in the wrong direction. Maybe you just got to feel this thing right now and understand that on the other side, there's this amazing thing waiting for you. And what you're going to find, it's not as complicated and difficult as you realize you think it is because you've made it up in your head. It's literally just a turn of the head and just looking and going like, oh, okay. And by the way, you have to reset it every day. It's not something that's just going to magically show up every day. It's a, this long answer I'm giving you, it happens every day, right? It's an everyday thing, and there's no magic answer of you do it once and you're good to go. If that
Yeah.
was the case, I'm pretty sure we would all be pretty,
Pretty
pretty
much there.
enlightened. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've found that having tools that help you reset to get there. I know you mentioned meditation, and there are just different things that we can do that help each one of us. You have a podcast
Mhm.
that can also be helpful. I mean, there are podcasts that just help lift us up and inform us. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
your podcast? So, if individuals would like to tune in to you to be uplifted on a regular basis, they would know how to find you and what it's about.
Yeah. My podcast is called Wonder More with Jason Tharp. And it literally is me uh, sitting on the floor talking to myself in hopes that somebody can relate to what I'm talking about. And, you know, one of the ways that I think that helps me teach people how to break impossible is by sharing all of my broken impossibilities and being really honest and open about it. And not only just like kind of giving some sort of, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I'm not I'm just a guy. And I think the more real I can be with that, because I tried before, like, oh, I should, have a flashy whatever. I mean, it does have an intro and it has all those cool things that you're supposed to have and all. But at the end of the day, really what it is like it's me sitting usually on my bedroom floor, um, just hitting the button and just talking in the mic. And I'll have an idea. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna talk about this struggle. And I'll just go into it. But I try to talk at it from an angle of I'm talking to myself, but hopefully, like a horoscope, you're going to be able to figure out how it relates to you, kind of thing. One of the things in storytelling, what I love about storytelling is when I create a character, I can beat it up. And at the end, I can still be the hero, right? And so I use myself in the podcast like that. I can, when I'm saying, you got to do this, you got to do that. I mean, I think that somebody that doesn't know that stuff might think that I'm like talking directly or preaching to the person listening. But when I'm saying that, it's actually talking to me. And the same as when I do, you know, speaking events and different things like this. It's the yous are all that is my therapy. I found that for me, what really works well in therapy is gutting myself in front of a bunch of strangers versus like sitting down with the therapist and trying to do it. That just never worked for me. But getting on stage or getting behind a mic and doing that is super healing, and because I think ultimately it feeds that little kid in me that wanted people just to see that I actually care and I want you to like me for me. And this is me. And I'm not afraid anymore to be me, and I think that is really where it all kind of comes from and really what I try to achieve with that.
Yeah, I've listened to it. It's really good.
Thank you. I
And you can
appreciate that.
tell that it is directly from the heart. And when we talk about heart leadership, that is a key quality. It's like, this is my heart laid out for you, however it can help you, however it can support you. Again, we're all navigating different things, but if we can be transparent with it, and again, since our theme this month is all about ego, right? It's like
Mhm.
balanced ego. I'm not doing this so you think I'm the most amazing, nor am I doing it because I think my self worth is so much less than. I'm just here. And this is
Right.
me. And this is how I did my journey. If it can help you, here it is.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to find you to be a keynote speaker, to come in, any of those things, we like to just kind of share partway through so they know where to find you. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that?
It's really simple. It's just jasontharp.com is my adult speaking side of things. Any children's book, if you just search my name and attach, author or children's book, there'll be a bunch of stuff that kind of pops up. But Wonderville Studios is the kid side of stuff, like the children's book stuff. In there, I write stuff that I wish that I would have had when I was a kid, is really kind of the way I like to explain it. I write books for weird kids that feel different, that the world has told them that their differences don't matter. I write stuff that tells them it does matter, and that's actually the best thing that you should be fighting for as you grow up is protecting your differences from other people. Yeah. And then on social medias, I'm on like, I think pretty much every one of them in some capacity. The only one I'm really not too active on is Twitter. Anything there. And if I can answer questions for me, I'm always up for discussions of stuff, putting positivity out there, all those things like that. But yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about your journey, but there's so much that you do. You really have not allowed anyone to put you in a box to tell you, well,
Mm.
you can't be an inspirational speaker and a child's author and a
Right.
podcast host. Like you have this plethora of stuff that you offer. So, how do you find inspiration to go across so many platforms? And quite honestly, looking at your art, it's so fun
Mhm.
and it draws you in a way where you're just like, okay, I can see that there's something kind of quirky, but it's not so serious. How do
Yeah.
you find that? Is it all in meditation? Is it just something that you've been doing your whole life? Where is
Yeah.
that in Jason?
Well, it's funny, like, because you mentioned listen to like, some of my podcasts and I listened to some of yours, and you had a discussion where you guys were talking about how, it was ego around like worrying about what people think or how that kind of you measure up to those things. And I think early on, so I knew when I was 6 what I wanted to do. I mean, I knew I'd watch Saturday morning cartoons. Like I would love the Flintstones and Woody Woodpecker. And I would, my parents bought a VCR around 7 and I would record it and I would pause the TV and I would trace the character. I'd tape, back when TV screens were glass and you could do this, I'd tape paper all over the screens and I would trace the characters. And like I didn't know back then what I was actually doing was giving myself art lessons. And my dad, I'm positive, and just getting me to be quiet because I was a talk all the time kind of kid. I know it's shocking. You hear me talk all the time here, but and he just said, people got paid to do that. And coming from a small town, I mean, you come from a small town too. I even come from a smaller town than the small town you were from. There were no cartoon people, or at the time I thought it was just the same as like my dad works at, he's a maintenance man, and my uncle's a carpenter, and I thought that's just there's a cartoon guy, and there wasn't. And so you kind of just get used to making stuff, right? And you just kind of keep experimenting. And when nobody's telling you you're doing it wrong, like you don't think about it. And so when it came time to doing the social stuff or putting stuff out there, there's a really great Neil Gaiman when the ceremony when they graduate, whatever it is, the speech that he does, like there's the Steve Jobs one's is famous, but Neil Gaiman does this really great when he's talking to a liberal arts college of writers, and he said when you feel like you're walking down the street completely naked, you might be on the right path. And that's kind of the way I feel a lot of times when I put stuff out there. If it feels safe to me, I probably won't post it. If it's something that like I think that it might be good, I'll still post. That's what makes me want to push it further there. I'm definitely a person, if you tell me that I can't do it, I'm going to show you all the reasons I can. Like, and you have to understand now going into writing children's books, I wanted to do this more than anything. This was, if you would have asked me when I was a kid, I would tell you it, but I was told my whole life all the reasons why it would never work. My eighth grade guidance counselor told me that I would never amount to anything because all I did was draw all over everything, right? All the way up through even as an adult when I was creating brands that were doing pretty well, outside of, you know, like as much as like what people would tell me you weren't doing, it would be stuff that now all the people are saying, like what my friend's doing that I wasn't friends with when I was a kid, right? As all these things are evolving, I'm going to decide I'm going to give all that up and I'm going to actually try finally, and I'm 39 at that time when this decision was made. I'm going to say no to everything that I'm supposed to say yes to and yes to what the 6 year old me wanted to say yes to. And when I did that, I had $140. Like I'm talking $140 to my name, period. End of story. Like that's it. And I took the biggest risk and I jumped. And this was into all of my doubts. Like it was, I'm not a good writer, all this stuff. But I knew I could draw. So I leaned into that. And that's how I got my first publishing deal with Scholastic. and then Simon Schuster, then Macmillan, and in print, and then I write and publish and uh, make my own books, and it's that I think is it Ben Franklin's quote, like when you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's not really work. Um, it's just kind of like, oh, today I'm going to make this, and it might suck, and that's okay. And I just make it and I throw it out there, and if nobody likes it, then whatever. And I think that too many of us get wrapped up in, do they like me? And I was trained as a kid not to worry about that. And what sucked growing up is really awesome now because I'm not worried and I don't care if you don't like what I do. That's fine. Then just keep moving. Like, because there's plenty of stuff out there for you to look at.
Yeah. And as far as writing kids' books, what a great empowering message to give to kids, especially in a day now of social media and how easy it is for kids to hide behind keyboards to bully. At least in our day, if you were going to bully someone, it was face to face, or you had
Right.
to pick up a like handheld telephone to call their house. And then all their parents had to do was say, nope, you can't talk to them and hang up.
Right. It's a yin and yang, right? Like there's so much power in being able to do what they can do now and connect with kids around the world to see you're not alone. But at the same time, like we could escape our bullies. It was like we can get away from the noise and go throw rocks and hit rocks with sticks and just kind of disappear for a little bit to kind of figure stuff out. So it is a weird kind of thing, but I just really hope that when a kid, and to be honest, like adults, there's a lot of adults that read my books that have the exact same experience, that they can kind of like see themselves in the stories. And that was kind of my goal all along, because that's where the Shel Silverstein, Sid Hoff, when I was a kid, they became my best friends because I felt like they understood me. And all it was they wrote stories that I could see myself in. And I think that that's what the power of like being a creative, for me at least, that's where the joy comes from, is that like I'm hopefully able to make stuff that no matter what age you are, whether it's me speaking on stage, whether it's me drawing something, or whether me posting something on Instagram or whatever, that somebody can see it and they can see themselves, and it just changes their day to realize that, like, as bad as it might be, there is a silver lining. You just got to look in the right direction. And that's kind of what I do. And so, yeah, I don't, it sounds weird. Like you would think I put a lot of thought into all those, but I really don't. I just kind of go like, what am I feeling today? Okay, let's do that.
For me, again, I go back to I honor that because if it's not a lot of thought, then it's a lot of heart.
Right. Yeah.
And that is how we connect so much. And we feel that you feel us. And you're like, okay, that's creative flow. I'm not going to overthink this and wonder, oh, is someone going to buy this from a
Right.
commercial standpoint? I'm going to put what I feel and what's creatively flowing through me out. And if it resonates with you, awesome. And if it
Right.
doesn't, as you said, you can keep moving and find what does.
Right.
But I want to circle that back around to how
Yeah.
you're kind of doing patient advocacy very much in the same way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm a patient advocate for NRG, which is a foundation that do like a lot of the clinical trials with its doctor side. So I'm setting with, I mean, some top docs around the country, right? And they're talking about the clinical trials that are going on, specifically brain cancer. So, I'm not in the room with all the other types of cancers, but with this one, with brain cancer in particular. So, I guess the easiest way to kind of say it is that, my role is to be the patient in the room and stick up for the patient. And while I'm not a huge fan and I really have no desire to talk to other cancer patients, I do have a huge desire to talk to other doctors and really explain. So, how I work in that would be, if you're a doc presenting a clinical of whatever, my question is always back to them. So, what about the patient? Like, you're extending a life by 3 months. What's that look like? How are they supposed to get there? Like there's much more effect than just the patient. There's the patient's family. There's the patient's, how they're going to pay for it. There's all these things that in the process of trying to solve a problem, that people that are the problem solvers, and they are trying to be problem solvers. Like these docs are really, the one thing I will tell you is when I'm behind the scenes and they're not treating me like a patient and they're treating me like an equal, these docs really do want to solve this problem. And luckily, it's not, it hasn't been, I would say that my first experience with my first doc has been the rarity. Like I haven't had that experience when talking to other doctors so far. I'm sure I've definitely had that experience when I talk to other doctors about food, things you put in, stuff like that. It depends on the topic.
So, on your site, you have this amazing story that you tell in both images and in words. So you make it super easy for people to kind of get a good sense of who you are and what you bring forward. Is this what people could expect in your publications as well? Is this like a true Jason style?
Yes, I would say that most everything that you're going to find from me, it's self-reflective in some sort of way. It definitely is. If you look at my about section, I'm a extremely visual learner, right? So I tend to make sure that the visual is there as well as people that are more, the right brain, right? So I try to cover both sides. Everything that you'll find from me is something that I've went through. It's came from kind of rooted through what I do. I don't read other people's stuff in terms of for inspiration of any sort of stuff. It's really, I'll read it for, wow, that's really cool. Or a lot of times, audiobooks, I'll do it at like double speed while I'm working or something. So I can kind of get the gist of it. Same with podcasts. I kind of listen to those, double speed to kind of get the gist. But I try to not, like, I don't read kids' books at all, like on purpose, because I don't want to be influenced by whatever. It's all that you see is going to be self reflective of something I have experience of going through, for sure, or stuff that I've talked to other kids or adults that they've experienced. And trying to, like, I have a book right now that's out called Inspiration Fairy. And that one comes from, I was doing school visits and I would have all these kids come up to me and say, what do you do when your friends don't like what you like anymore? And it became a consistent thing. This was right before COVID. Everybody kept like all these kids, like it was like 10 different schools. And it was like, wow, this must be a thing. And come to find out what it was, I started asking, well, like what? Can you give me an example? And there's these games that the kids were playing. And my kids are a little older, so I didn't know. I knew about Minecraft from my kids, was that their generation. Well, now these kids were talking about, there was Fortnite, there was Minecraft, and there was Roblox. And so their big question was like, some of their friends ended up going and liking Roblox, and or some of them like Fortnite, and they would say that you're playing a baby game, or you're being too much of a baby. Why do you like those things? But deep down, that they really like them. And I thought about, like, how did that work for me as a kid? Like, when I'm sitting there going, like, I would rather sit here and draw this stuff than go kick a soccer ball. Like, and people would say, like, that stuff's stupid. Like, why would you do that stuff? So that's where the inspiration fairy came from. But most of the rest of the stuff, I have a book that's called It's Okay to Be a Unicorn. That was about growing up in a small town and everybody telling me all the reasons why I would never do it. And they made up all these stories. And that's what the unicorn book's about. So yeah, they're all told stories about me through a lens of what I think that a kid would accept quickly. I think that's the important part that we have to think about when we're trying to present stuff to kids. The first thing is you got to get them to fall in love with the character to get the message to go through. So if I use a unicorn, or if I use a bunny, if I use a bear, the kid's guard is down a little bit because you don't have to fight through to get them to like the character. So you kind of pass the first barrier quickly, and then you can beat up that character, and the kid is going to kind of embrace it even more and kind of see that, like, wow, this is really cool stuff that this guy's gone through this thing and he's been able to do it. And so, and at the end, the character could be triumphant. And that's kind of what I try to do is, I try to beat up and that's probably a Wile E. Coyote kind of thing, right? Like, you try to beat up the character at the end, but you still root for him, right? It's the
Yeah.
same sort of idea. It's my, all of what I create is deeply rooted in Saturday morning cartoons and what I learned from those things, and just learning how to fall in love with just making stuff.
And I keep going back to bringing that up because when someone hits your website, you go to so many different websites and they're good. Everyone has their own flair. But when I landed on your site, it was impactful. It was clear. The colors draw you in, and you can tell that it is coming from this authentic place of, here I am, and
Mhm.
I hope it engages you. But if it doesn't, then I wish you all the best on your journey. And so everything you described is clear and evident in just one website. And that's not an easy thing to do, my friend. So you
Mhm.
hit the
I
mark
appreciate that. I
incredibly
appreciate
well.
that.
So
Yeah, I appreciate
again,
that.
tell folks it is, how do they get to it?
Yeah. It's just jasontharp.com. It's harp with the T in front of it.com and or Wonderville Studios, or they can just search my name, Jason Tharp, and find it on socials. It's the same. On social media, it was harder to get with Jason, find Jason Tharp. So mostly it's probably Wonderville Studios is where they're going to find it.
All right. So as we're going to
Thank you.
wrap up here, I want to hear from you because you knew Austin and you reached out to him. And that's how
Yeah.
we ended up connecting. And it was from that heart centered, heart leader place. It's, hey, I met you in the past. We knew each other. And now I
Yep.
see that we're doing kind of the same kind of heart centered work out in the world. Let's chat. And that to me is this wondrous thing in itself. It's like no ego, just, hey, how can
Mm-hmm.
we find ways to get messages out to help uplift people?
Yeah.
And when we talk about heart leadership, man, that's a huge heart leader skill. So when you hear us calling you a heart leader, what does that do for you right in here?
It makes me feel seen, right? Because, there was no intentions of like, reaching out to Austin. It was just like popped up. Like I was telling him, like it was on LinkedIn. He just popped up for, I don't even know what it was. It was a random post, and I was looked at his profile and I scrolled down. It was like at the time when I met him, he was doing had a suitcase wrap, and we were at San Diego Comic-Con, and we were on a shuttle bus, and it was just like this. He just happened to be sitting next to me, and we talked about it, and just I was like, I'm older than him. I was like, man, it's a good kid. He's got a good head on his shoulders. Like he's really like he's going to do good in the world. And really, that was kind of like where the cross happened, and then we each went our separate ways, right? And then through LinkedIn, we just crisscrossed again, and I clicked on your sites, and I was like, holy cow! Like yeah, I really dig what they're doing. It sounds a lot like what I'm doing. So it was just a hey, how's it going? You got, it seems like we're doing the same sort of stuff. If you ever want to catch up, that would be cool. And to me, when you say heart leader, it's exactly that. It's entering in. Now, here I will say a little side note caveat where also I think, and you'll have to tell me if you agree. When you do lead with the heart, you also kind of have to deal with your ego and keep it in check of thinking that people are going to think I want something from them. And that's always still I still struggle with that a little bit, that you can just reach out to people to reach out to them, and I don't have to worry about like so much of like, oh, they're gonna think I want something, and that was kind of the thing. I was like, oh, we'll see what happens. And then he messaged, and then here we are. But yeah, it to me it just says this is how it works. When you are in line with who you are, people will crisscross your path. That if you're aware when they do it and you reach out, that they could be a lifeline when you need it, or you could be their lifeline when they need it. And throughout the process, we actually end up elevating each other. And you're not doing anything other than just being yourself. And to me, that's what's really cool about this kind of stuff. And also, it makes, from a personal standpoint, it makes all the crap I experienced as a kid proves to me that it was lies, because I felt this when I was little, and I would feel connected really early on to people. And I was kind of always told that that was wrong. And I never let go of that. Even growing up, I maybe didn't put it so much on my sleeve as what I used to when I was little, but now it's just kind of confirmation. Just keep leaning into that. And it breaks all your excuse. I think we talked about before. Like it takes away our excuses. Like you can't make excuses anymore. And it kind of sucks in that standpoint, because you can't be like, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Like you're like, no, you really can't, because now you know how it works. And so yeah, no, it's amazing. So I really do appreciate the reconnecting, meeting you. Like I can only imagine where we're going to go from here, and all that stuff like that. And it's just cool to see other people like me out there? Because sometimes you just kind of go like, I don't know, I'm just doing what I do. And then you find people like, wow, this is the thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And I thank you for bringing up like both sides of the fence too, because yeah, leading with heart, there's always that like, okay, are they going to think that I'm too much? Are they going to feel like I'm just doing this to get something? But
Right.
when you do meet those people who are in the same like heart coherence, you realize that no, there's so much we can do together now because like we're resonating, we're on the same vibe. So
Yeah.
how can we just take this and make something even greater together?
Right. Right.
And that's going to be the exciting part because we've already talked about you coming back on the show again
Yeah, absolutely.
and
I'm down. Yeah.
diving even deeper into more
Yeah.
things because we touched on so many things and all of those things we can go even deeper into now
Yes.
that our community has a sense for who Jason Tharp is and
Yeah.
what he's authentically bringing to the world.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time for sure.
Well, we appreciate you and everything you're doing for kids, for those of us who have navigated cancer, being an advocate for doctors, even though it's like brain cancer and I had a different kind, cancer is cancer. So,
Yep.
the
It
more that
sucks
we
either way you
can,
look at it.
no matter where it is in your body, you do not want it.
No.
You just don't. And so we will make certain everyone who listens or watches this knows how to get to your site, to your podcast, to all of the amazing things. And if they would like to have you as a speaker, which I would greatly encourage if they're bringing in speakers, that they know how to get to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I will do the same to help you any way I can as well.
All right. Anything else you would like to share before we pop off of here for this one anyway?
Yeah, no, just keep being awesome. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're crushing it. I salute everything you guys are doing. And if anytime you need anything, I'm always here. Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you all, amazing Sweet Vera community, for tuning in for another episode of the Heart Leader podcast, where our heart and our mind align. We will indeed make sure that you have all of the information to get a hold of Jason, from his social media to his website to how you can tune into his awesome podcast. And don't forget, we have the Ego Alignment Journal. So you can hop on over to our social media, just DM us the word align, and we will make sure that we get that over to you. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you in the Sweet Vera community.